Welcome to What's Next in Emergency Management with Michael Prasad of the Center for Emergency Management Intelligence Research. This podcast highlights advocacy, research, academics, and more. I'm Christopher, an AI-generated voice used for interludes and breaks. Please note that Michael is an Amazon affiliate and may be compensated for referrals and content in this podcast. He is also a certified emergency manager, and the CEM is a registered trademark of the International Association of Emergency Managers USA and used with authorization. This episode's special guest is Dr. Jeannette Sutton.
Hi folks, and Happy New Year. It's Michael Prasad from the Center for Emergency Management Intelligence Research, also known as the CEMR, and here's my January 2026 update for the emergency management-related advocacy, research, and writing work that I've done last month, as well as providing a peek into what I'll be doing this month and into the near future. Also starting this month, I'm going to mention someone else's podcast, which is in the realm of emergency management, during each one of my podcast episodes. Well, I'll probably have Christopher read it as an interlude or break, but I will also include all the links for it in the show notes. My consulting firm, Barton Dunant Emergency Management Training and Consulting, puts out an annual reading list of 12 or more books to read throughout 2026. You can find the link to that list in this month's show notes as well. Please note that the WordPress blog site where this reading list resides is now a member-only site, member-only access, at $12 a year. We had to move to this format because we were getting overwhelmed with foreign bots trying to hack our platform. Plus, we weren't making any revenue, and the site cost us more than $1,000 a year to operate and maintain. And if you're looking for New Year's predictions from me, from an emergency management perspective, I might have done that in 2024 going into 2025. But last year was a big switch in the U.S. federal policy changes, to say the least. I really have no idea what will happen next, with one big exception of a promise that I will not be sitting on the sidelines during any of it.
As of January 9th of 2026, it does not look like there are enough students registered in the water-related threats and hazards course that Mike was offering online. Look for more details on what will happen next, possibly a self-paced version at a lower price point, but without the live instruction, in the Barton Dunant social media posts, as well as a future episode of this podcast.
On the research side, I'm looking into the current situation of California's Disabilities Disaster Access and Resources, or DDAR program. The funding that they have as it relates to California's investor-owned utilities, an IOU. It's an interesting acronym, eh? And their funding requirements to supporting those IOUs, Public Safety Power Shutoffs, or PSPS. There's a lot of acronyms in emergency management. A PSPS is when the IOU proactively de-energizes their power lines when weather conditions indicate the possibility of those power lines starting a wildfire, whether they're older lines, older wiring, whatever it is, that sparks can come up. That sounds pretty bad. Yet these shutoffs can last for days, even a week or so potentially. That's also bad for people who depend on electricity for their activities of daily living. The California Utility Commission recently ruled that the Southern California Edison, or SCE, IOU would not get rate relief to fund the DDAR program through a nonprofit organization, since they were already doing other items or parts of the DDAR program through California's 211 and performing them themselves, such as a battery replacement program. There are at least 5 story arcs here, some of which are background for the uninitiated, and the concept of a holistic approach to the PSPS program to benefit people with disabilities and access to functional needs, also known by the acronym DAFN, through the DDAR program in California is really groundbreaking, I think. And I bet there are a bunch of other states considering PSPS actions to help protect against wildfire starting in their own outdoors. I've already started lining up interviews and background material, and I'll start writing on this soon. Here are some of the details on work I published via third parties. No Enemies for Emergency Managers, co-authored by Daniel Scott over at the Emergency Management Network Substack. An introductory piece on the PSPS concern I mentioned in this episode for Matt Green's State of Disaster Substack called Impacts of Public Safety Power Shutoffs, PSPS, on People with Disabilities. And a big event in 2026, security classifications for the Domestic Preparedness Journal, that's coming out in January. At Medium, I have a couple of articles. In general, most of my articles over there are paywalled for subscribers to that platform. Here's what I have coming from the December of 2025. Atmospheric River, Emergency Management Intelligence from the book Emergency Management Threats and Hazards Water. FEMA in Chaos, Why Does This Matter to You? And for FEMA, it's the end of the world as I know it, and Trump feels fine. I have started a publication over at Medium written for emergency managers by certified emergency managers called The Lipper. If you're interested in writing and you think you're a CEM, please check out the details in the show notes. From a compensation point of view, which I think is very important to those of us who make the time and effort to advocate for, research about, and write on emergency management topics, is via Medium's own partner program. You decide whether to paywall your own stories. We publish them in a common platform. And at this point so far, I've not seen any other emergency management type publications on Medium. I will post a link to the January 2026 edition of this new publication, The Lipper, in the show notes.
As we mentioned at the top of this episode, here's the podcast from someone else we would like to highlight. Please check out Eric Holderman's Disaster Zone podcast, hosted by the Readiness Lab. You can find it on major podcast outlets like Apple and Spotify. Mike told me to plug his episode recorded on October 15, 2025 entitled Emergency Management's Role in Civil Defense with Michael Prasad, which looks at some of the current differences between Homeland Security, Homeland Defense, and Emergency Management. See a link to this podcast and Mike's episode in the show notes. In the next episode we will provide more details about Dr. Sutton's podcast.
Our special guest this episode is Dr. Jeannette Sutton. I first connected with Dr. Sutton in her work on public warning alerts through an online class she co-developed, which is now available from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Dr. Sutton is one of the leading authorities on public alerts in the United States. Everything from those text warnings on your cell phones to the emergency broadcast system and broadcast television to the variable message boards you see on the highways. All of these systems are interconnected, and the messages put out on them have to be crafted carefully and with purpose. I got a chance to meet Dr. Sutton in person at the IAM USA conference in 2025, and I asked her my two questions. What was recently had she done in emergency management, and what's next? You can find Dr. Jeannette Sutton at thewarnroom.com and put that information out in the show notes as well, too.
Hi, Mike. It was nice to finally meet you in person as well, and thanks for having me on your new podcast. In your intro for me, and thank you for that as well, you noted the Warn Room. Recently, we got a facelift to our website. As the research-backed findings we have been collecting, we have been translating into results. I have been spending more time working one-on-one with emergency management practitioners. Now, any emergency management-related organization can request a message audit and template review with findings that align with the state-of-the-art in alert and warning theory and practice. I've conducted reviews for emergency management agencies across the U.S. and recently worked with several institutions of higher education on their emergency or crisis message templates. Listeners can go to www.thewarnroom.com to see the new services offered. And since we last talked, I spent a day in Washington where I testified before the House Committee on Energy and Commerce, Subcommittee on Communications Technology. This was a huge opportunity to speak about the evidence-based practices that we have been advocating for among alerting authorities. The testimony I presented is also available on thewarnroom.com.
Thanks, Jeannette. That audit capability sounds fantastic, something most organizations really should do in advance of using their crisis communications, have it all set up so that it's going to work. And then what's next question? I understand you have started a podcast yourself.
Well, like you, I've launched a new podcast. Mine is as a co-host with Eddie Bertola, and it's called The Alerting Authority, which brings weekly guest speakers and analyses to alerts and warnings. And you can find The Alerting Authority on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Our first guest was none other than Craig Fugate, the FEMA administrator for 8 years under President Obama. And in our additional episodes, we have brought foundational scholars in the field of alerts and warnings, and will continue to bring insights from practitioners who have been on the front lines. You know, Mike, there's no other podcast that focuses directly on the space of alerts and warnings. This is a clear gap that should be a priority at all levels of government, and we're really proud to bring the Alerting Authority to listeners. I'm also continuing to explore the use of AI as a subject matter advisor to EM1. EM1 is a closed system designed for use by emergency managers to help in their planning and preparedness efforts. It's also a system that can be used to check for message compliance against the state-of-the-art practices, and future iterations of EM1 are likely to include agentic approaches, acting like a human agent, to help alert and warning providers successfully generate actionable alerts and warnings that align with the research. I'm really excited to see that roll out after it's been proven effective. And finally, back to the Warn Room, which has begun to schedule warning boot camps for 2026. As I conducted trainings across the U.S., I saw that these events can feel like drinking from a fire hose. Attendees go home with the tools and skills to build message libraries, but they still lack the time and the willpower to get them completed. So this is the reason for establishing these warning boot camps. They are virtual small group settings over 2 hours a day over the course of 5 days. And participants will receive direct feedback from their peers and from me. And at the end of the week, they will have completed the bulk of their library for critical incidents and be ready to go when minutes matter.
Thanks, Jeannette. Can't wait to listen to that podcast, and we'll plug it a little bit more in our next episode as well, too. And you said finally for the Warn Room, but I think you've got some other training going on as well, too, this year.
Oh, that's right. I've joined forces with Eddie Bertola of Bertola Advising Services to deliver webinars and custom trainings to emergency managers and other organizations across the country. Here's a couple of comments that people have shared with us following one of our trainings that we did in the Capital Region of Texas, where participants said things like, the presenters were experts in their respective fields, their presentations were informative, engaging, and entertaining, and the learning experience was enjoyable. Another person said, the presenters were exceptional. I soaked up every word. I learned about how people process information, get fatigued by alerts, etc., and I'd go to any session taught by the sociologist, Dr. Sutton. That guy from California, Eddie, was bright, funny, and engaging. I thought those were really great comments that really summarize kinds of things that people say when they've heard us speak to them in our workshops. We also just completed a year-long project with the New York State Division of Criminal Justice, Missing Persons Clearinghouse, and the New York State Police, where we focused on their missing person and Amber Alert messaging. This was a top-to-bottom review of policy, partners, process, and messages that included in-person workshops and online discussions. Because of their commitment to this work, we believe that New York stands above all other states in terms of their readiness for issuing effective missing person and Amber Alerts. If anyone is interested in a custom training or message assistance, please reach out to the Warn Room to learn more. And also, the Warn Room will continue to provide blog posts to share how to improve messages, and will also post learning series on alert and warning key topics. For instance, this November, I posted a 7-part series on over-alerting and how to manage its consequences. I wrote about the lessons that Dr. Michelle Wood and I learned from emergency managers and the public, leading to the identification of dimensions and definitions of varying aspects of over-alerting. We didn't have these definitions before we did the research, but now that we do, we can actually start to measure the things that cause people to decide to opt out of alerts and warnings.
Thanks again, Jeannette. Those were great updates, and we'll put all the sort of links and other things like that in the show notes as well, too. And over at the CMER, we continue to send out alerts, training opportunities, emergency management intelligence, systems that we find, and more in our monthly blog. You can subscribe for free via a link in the show notes.
This has been What's Next in Emergency Management with Michael Prasad. I'm the AI voice of Christopher. Mike does the typing and I do the talking for these front and back ends and sometimes the middles, so please share, subscribe, like, or whatever it is you humans do for this podcast. Thank you for listening.